Paul McKenna, I don't know any of you who know Paul McKenna, but he claims that he can make you thin. It's a bold statement, I know, but his book by the same title, I Can Make You Thin, this is a testament to all the people that have followed him and his theology on food. Because indeed, many people, by following this and following him, have actually lost weight. That's amazing. In fact, he goes as far to say that he can reveal the truth about exercise and cravings and our body's relationship with food and a whole range of things to do with eating. But it's almost as if he's disregarding some of the most important rules of eating that we might know when he says things like, eat what you want, when you want, not when you think you should, but just stop when you feel full. So this can be a revelation for anyone and everybody that is searching for a new way of living, a new way of eating. And I quote from page 16, he says, "Don't take my word for it, just follow my instructions step by step and notice how your body and your life begin to change for the better." Now, some food critics, professionals, health nutritionalists might really disagree with this kind of manifesto that losing weight is just so easy, because they might say that in order to lose weight and keep it off and live a healthy, good and proper lifestyle, there are certain do's and don'ts to do with food. And this kind of radical, bit off the wall, kind of seemingly a bit persuasive way of following Paul and his way can lead to a changed life for the better, might at best seem a bit fanciful and at worst misleading and very wrong. So that led me to think about a quote out of this book, which is God's word, the Bible. And Jesus says in Matthew chapter 11, verse 29 and 30, he says, "Walk with me, work with me, and watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." Now, to the Pharisees, Jesus seemed very radical and seemingly off the wall and rule-breaking, actually, not following the do's and don'ts of the law. And the idea that following Jesus and his way could lead to a changed life for the better was, I think, indeed for the Pharisees, not just fanciful, but definitely misleading and most definitely wrong. Because actually Jesus was radical, and you could say a little bit off the wall, but I don't think rule breaking, I think more ground breaking. Because Jesus didn't disregard the law, actually quite the opposite. He was a Torah observing Jew. But he breathed life into the lifeless, flat, legalistic words of the law that had been upheld and adhered to. The laws that bound and restricted those that obeyed them under old ways. And he turned things upside down by living according to God's desires in love and grace. This was a really new way. This was a brand new way of thinking. And that's exactly what the Pharisees didn't approve of. Jesus doing this new thing. Not doing things the old way, not doing things the right way, not doing the way things had always been done. And last week, Chris talked about Jesus doing a new thing through the story of the new wine in old wineskins in Luke 5. And we're going to stay with that theme actually today. It's a bit like last week was part 1, and this week is a little bit of part 2. to do with Jesus doing a new thing. And later we'll look a little bit into Luke 6. This week I came across a motto for Google. Don't ask me how I came across it, it was a bit random, but Google's motto before 2015 was this: don't be evil. And then they went through a massive restructure, and the motto was changed to do the right thing. Their code of conduct requires all employees to do the right thing, follow the law, act honourably, and treat each other with respect. And I find that really interesting because I can imagine the Pharisees around Jesus having a similar sort of motto, but not with doing the right thing, more like doing things right. Their motto might have been something like, do things right, follow the law as it is written in the Old Testament, in the books of the Torah, act honourably, or be seen to be acting appropriately and lawfully, and treat each other with respect. You see, the external manifestation of abiding by the law was so very, very important to them, and it mattered above everything. But that didn't leave any wriggle room for a personal relationship or an encounter with God. Doing things right, or being seen to be doing things right, was all that really mattered. And the fact that Jesus was law-abiding, he'd been brought up to respect the law, didn't actually leave anything for the Pharisees to kind of have him on from that respect, apart from the fact that he wasn't bound by those rules and regulations. He went beyond them, because rules don't build relationship. And Jesus is all about relationship. Another quote from an Austrian-American management consultant, Peter Drucker. He said, "It is more important to do the right thing than to do things right." So actually that's a little bit more in line with where Jesus is coming from. Because the Pharisees were so focused on doing things right, and they were known for their strict adherence to the Jewish law, but they did actually go far beyond the written biblical commandments, and they added in their own rigid and harsh rules, more don'ts than do's, actually, especially around things like the Sabbath. And that's what we'll look at a little bit later. But this all focuses on rules, and it restricts freedom of individuals, and the emphasis on outward appearance and appearing to be doing things good and proper and observing the law and being obedient. Did they really think that following rules like that would bring them closer to God? You see, the way to God is not through laws and rules alone, although they have their place. The way to God is through Jesus, his Son. John 14, verse 6, Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." So then that raises the question, what is more important to us? Is it doing things right, following laws, rules, being obedient, being honourable, being proper, doing what is expected, doing things as they've always been done because that feels right? Or doing something different, doing the right thing, more specifically doing a Jesus thing, encountering God through a real personal relationship with Jesus, who is the way, the truth, and the life. See, when Jesus was healing people, he was doing the right thing. When he shared his time with prostitutes and tax collectors and lepers and people on the edge of society, those that were marginalised, he was doing the right thing. When he ate with his disciples and with sinners, he was doing the right thing. When he gave his very life on the cross, he was doing the right thing. And when he was buried and rose to life 3 days later, he was doing the most glorious right thing. Now, some of these things broke the rules seemingly and boundaries that were in place, and they caused upset and controversy and great wonder, actually. But all of these things were a great demonstration of just one really important thing, and that's love. A deep, deep relational, unconditional, amazing, God-breathed, Spirit-filled love. When Jesus draws near to us in our brokenness, he's doing the right thing. When he breaks through our feelings of hopelessness and loneliness or fear or anxiety or our worries, our troubles, our doubts, he's doing the right thing in love. Above everything that is going on in the world, above everything that might be going on in your world, above all our flaws and failures and concerns, Jesus wants to do the right thing for each one of us, in us and with us and through us and for us. Jesus then was breaking through the norm. He was doing unexpected things. He wasn't doing things as they had always been. And he's still doing that. He does that now. He's doing it today. He's doing it for you, and he's doing that for me. Actually, the possibilities are endless when we just put our trust fully in him. In Jesus, who breaks new ground, who breaks down barriers, who brings relationship and freedom, actually, in grace. So we're going to do something slightly different and against the norm now, because we're going to have communion now in this part of the service. Matt's going to lead us, and we're going to come forward for communion. And that might seem a little bit uncomfortable, it might be radical, a bit off the wall, but I hope that we can embrace it. Embrace the opportunity of doing something different together, being open to something new this morning, being curious and ready to encounter Jesus, maybe in a different, new way. So,
the reading this morning is from Luke chapter 6, verses 1 to 11. And it's titled, Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and his disciples began to pick some heads of grain, rub them in their hands, and eat the kernels. Some of the Pharisees asked, "Why are you doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" Jesus answered them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and taking the consecrated bread, he ate what is lawful only for priests to eat. And he also gave some to his companions. Then Jesus said to them, 'The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath.' On another Sabbath, he went into the synagogue and was teaching, and a man was there whose right hand was shriveled. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. But Jesus knew what they were thinking and said to the man with the shriveled hand, 'Get up and stand in front of everyone.' So he got up and stood there. Then Jesus said to them, 'I ask you, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to destroy it?' He looked around at them all and then said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' He did so, and his hand was completely restored. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were furious and began to discuss with one another what they might do to Jesus."
Yes.
May his Lord.
And so we're going to keep in the vein of thinking about doing the right thing or doing things right. And that passage is a really, really good example of how irritated the Pharisees were at the way Jesus did things. They were always trying to catch him out and trip him up. And these two examples of what happened on two different Sabbaths are good examples of that. So there's one Sabbath where Jesus, I imagine him being a bit chilled out actually, walking through the grain fields with his disciples, and they're just picking corn and they're chatting, and they're just free, they're just outside. And then the other Sabbath where Jesus is inside the temple and he's teaching, and it's very intentional and it's very structured. Two very different scenarios actually, but for both, the Sabbath means the same thing. It means life-giving in rest, life-giving in being in relationship with God. The Hebrew meaning of the word Sabbath is rest. It's an invitation to be present with God. And I can't help but think that the Pharisees just completely missed the point. It was always a contentious issue for the Pharisees, this thing about Sabbath and Jesus doing what was lawful or not doing what was lawful, or back to rules and regulations again, and for the Pharisees perceiving what was right. And they ask him so many questions. One of them, why are you doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath? Always for them, rules over relationship with a little sprinkling of judgment. So many questions. They were really cross with Jesus for allowing his disciples to break the Sabbath rule of no work. But because Jesus stands for relationship first, he challenges them, and he gives them a reminder of what happened with David in the book of Samuel when he does something that is considered to be unlawful, and he gives consecrated bread to his hungry companions. And the thing is, the Pharisees would have known that story really well. And so in trying to trap Jesus, actually, they were caught out themselves. And the same with the next story, with Jesus healing somebody on the Sabbath. Again, the Pharisees can't help it. They're following him with the sole purpose of catching him out and bringing him to account for the wrong that he does in their eyes. And yet again, Jesus, standing for relationship, he challenges the Pharisees. And what I love actually about Jesus, and especially in this passage, he always answers a question with a question. How irritating is that? He always asks a question as his response, and he challenges in them back. Why were they so afraid? What were they afraid of? Was it the unknown? Was it Jesus doing something new that would rock the boat and make them have to rethink things? Was it that Jesus was then and is still now the ultimate interpreter and authority of Scripture? Jesus said in Matthew 28, verse 18, all authority has been given by God to me. So that authority of Jesus, it needs a response. We know what the Pharisees' response was. It was to be angry and furious and to challenge and to question and to assume that it was wrong. But how do we deal with the authority of Jesus? How do we follow the rules without missing out on relationship? We've shared communion this morning. I wonder, was that about relationship for you? Sometimes we do things because that's what we do. We've always done it. It's good and right and proper. And communion forms part of our service, and that is good and right and proper. But was it an encounter for you? Jesus challenges people and the Pharisees and the teachers of the law every time he's in their midst. And he wanted to open their eyes to experience the true meaning of Sabbath. And that applies for us too. Excuse me, this quote is good. It says, "It's important to note that Jesus did not say that he was doing away with the idea of Sabbath. Rather, Jesus refocuses attention on the intention behind God's instruction to keep the Sabbath. Jesus observed the Sabbath as it was in Jewish law, but going beyond that, he wanted to bring full meaning into the word itself. He wanted to bring full meaning and full life into the day of Sabbath. He wanted to do that through himself, not through the law alone. God's intention with regards to the Sabbath law trumps obedience to the letter of the law. God's intention with regards to the Sabbath law trumps obedience to the letter of the law. And that's why in verse 5 is that really powerful little phrase when Jesus says, "The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." See, the Sabbath is intended to be a time of rest, and that might mean no work for some, but the greater purpose beyond that is to provide space to be with God. Our modern day Sabbath, if you like, is today, isn't it? Sunday, and I wonder what that's going to look like for you. I imagine we've all got a different way of spending today. It will be different because of circumstances and family background and dynamics. And some people do need to work and some people don't. That's just the reality of life today. But I just wonder, when was the last time that you really took the time to be fully present with God? Not out of duty, but out of desire. When was the last time that you took a true Sabbath rest? How on earth can you find true Sabbath rest in a busy week, in a busy day, in a busy life? Jesus wants to say to us that he is Lord of the Sabbath. He is Lord of your Sabbath and of mine. And it really matters what we think about that and how we respond to it. Do we hear the words of Jesus and respond like the Pharisees did, with frustration and anger and confusion and more questions and no time to just stop and really be with Jesus? Or do we actually encounter him? So I'm going to invite the band back up. And they're going to lead us in a couple of songs. And this is our opportunity to just respond, actually. We can respond in our hearts, in our minds. We can respond with our voices as we sing. We can respond by sitting quietly and listening to the words sung over us. We can respond by coming for prayer at the front or the back, or you can come and ask me. But I think there's an opportunity here to reconnect. Jesus is offering full life through relationship with him. So I'm going to invite you to just close your eyes. And if you want to, you could open your hands and just put them in your lap. What rules have you got in your life at the moment that control you, that have authority over you? Name them in your mind. Do you you want to live more freely, actually, under a different authority? Do you want to live under the authority of Jesus Christ? What do you need to surrender to Jesus this morning so that you can be more open to a relationship with him? Do you want to swap stress and striving and anxiety and the tyranny of rules and do's and don'ts? Do you want to swap those out for a true, deep, Jesus-centered peace? Because you can do that, because Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath. He is Lord of all. Jesus is really pleased you're here. It is good to be in his presence, and he is inviting you to build your life on him, to break out beyond what is right and known, and to just trust him. It might be risky, but it might be exhilarating. Jesus is ready to do the right thing, a new and beautiful thing in each one of us. So let's be open and ready to encounter a relationship with him.